Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to replace the cooling fan in an Alien Bees strobe unit. I got a bunch of these lights and the fans in a couple of them were starting to get really noisy, like noisier than anything else in my studio. So I emailed Alien Bees and they told me what the size was for the fan and the CFM required and voltage and all that stuff. And I could have just sent the light back to them. Apparently you pay them $35 and send them a light and they will service it and replace anything that needs replacing. But I just didn't feel like $35 plus the shipping back and forth and the downtime for the lights that I use pretty frequently. So instead I ordered myself a light off of Amazon. This is the Noctua, what is this? NF-A410, 40 by 10 millimeter premium fan. That's the size you need here, 40 by 40 by 10, 12 volt fan. I forget the CFM required, but this definitely gets there. This packaging is, pretty ridiculous for what's in it. It's a little, this is the fan, and this is the box that it comes. It's, overkill if you ask me. You don't need this premium packaging for a $14 fan. It's $14, guys. I mean, is this necessary? No, it's not necessary. But whatever. So the stuff you're going to need to replace this fan, basic tools. I don't even think you need this, but I put it down here anyway. This is just a small flathead. You need a Phillips head screwdriver. You need wire clippers. You need an electrician's pair of pliers for stripping. You need some zip ties. And this stuff comes with the fan, these little handy dandy wires, joiner doodads. There's an adapter because it has the PC style connectors, and this little thing, this little adapter just, sticks on there like that. And it's pretty simple, so I figured I'd make a little tutorial for anybody else whose fan is getting a little noisy. So let's get started. Let's take off the bulbs, because obviously you don't want your bulbs on while you're doing this, and you don't want to touch the bulbs. So I'm using this professional grade Domino's pizza napkin to keep my greasy fingerprints off of the bulbs. Yeah, you never want to put your fingers on things that get really hot inside of lights, because the oil on your fingers will heat up and make the glass break, and it'll explode, and that's not fun. So, got those off. Now let's just make a little space here for the stuff. There's 4 Phillips head screws here. Pretty self-explanatory. Set those aside. And these are just, I don't know if you call them wood screws, but it goes into plastic. They're not machine screws. They're coarse and sharp threads and not machine style. So they just go right into this molded plastic frame that the light has. Before we take this off, you do have to, that's why I had this screwdriver, to take the lever screw off, and it is spring loaded, so make sure you got a thumb on that, otherwise it will pop off. I mean, it won't pop off, but it might, you never know. So you take that off, and then, before you do that, make sure to loosen that. And you can just do that with your fingers. And remember how these washers go on, because you got to put this back together. So it's this geared screw nut thing, black washer, big, and it's not a flat washer. It is a concave or convex, depending on how you're looking at it, washer. So make sure you remember how that goes on. It's it bulges out from the housing. So remember that. And then there's just a big old bolt with no washer on this side. It's just a big bolt with a square part there that locks in. And then these little things come off, and then you drop it. Just make sure those stay in there. They kind of wedge into his seat there. Okay, so now it is time to take off the front plate. That part comes off lickety-split, just a little tug and it comes off. There's this little, I don't know if it's cardboard or plastic, it's probably some sort of weird hybrid space age material. That just comes right off. And then the problem with this is this just doesn't, you know, that is seated in there really good. And you could pry it out and maybe, you know, damage or break the PCB. But what I've found, an easy way to do it, oh, also, hot tip, take off the little white slider knobby protector thing first, because this whole thing is going to slide out. Instead of pulling and prying and prodding this whole guts out of this housing, what I found you can do is you can push on the remote phone jack. Just give that a little push, and you can see that this is starting to move. This is starting to push out. And there you go. Now, this unit is starting to slide out. Now, another thing you'll notice is that you can't just pull all this out. There are wires in there that are connected way down in there. And you can't just yank on it because it would screw up the connectors to the power switch and the power cable input. So what you do is, if you can see that it's these two PCBs connected in a T shape, you grab hold of the inner sideways one and then you grasp the front facing one and you kind of wiggle them a little bit, and boom, they come apart. And you can see there's all these little teeth that stick into the receptors right here, and they come out pretty easily. And there's only one wire that's running through this PCB out to the, it's just a grounding, that's all it is. It's just a grounding wire, and it connects to the front plate just to make sure you're not getting shocked. And I should state that in terms of shocking, there is a gigantic capacitor here, and it's a beefy one. It's, you know, maximum surge 550 volts. Not something you want to get zapped by. And, you know, if you want to be safe, before you start taking this apart, you could, because these are the two connectors right here, the two points where the capacitor is soldered to the PCB. You could, you know, short it out and discharge it. But one of the things that the Alien Bees guy told me is that there is a bleeder resistor on this board. So when you unplug the unit and turn it off, it takes a couple minutes for that resistor to bleed all the power out of the capacitor. So as long as it hasn't been plugged in for a few minutes, you're really in no danger of, you know, of zapping yourself. So with that in mind, this board just slides freely on this ground wire. So you can kind of slide it out and get a little more view of what's going on inside of the unit. You can see that there's the fan, and it's zip tied in. I don't know why they went with zip tying it in instead of screwing it in or whatever, but hey, you know, whatever. Save a couple bucks on screws, I guess. So all you got to do is take your snippers and go in there and snip, and then you want to snip the power cable to it also. Bada bing. And that brings the whole, well, actually it's probably a better idea to snip it on the bottom, because otherwise you can't pull it out easily. So now there's your old fan. And you can see the difference between their fan and my new handy dandy, what is it called? Noctua fan. They're not terribly different. The one that's in the Alien Bees strobe doesn't have any kind of, you know, information on it. It doesn't say, it's just got like a part number, that's it. B1600E1B04. I don't know what that means, but whatever. That's going away. So the new one is going to go in there. So now we're going to first clean all these zip tie detritus out of here. And we're going to wire up the new one. And another thing is inside of here, the power wire that connected to the old fan is wrapped in this heat shrink tubing around this bundle of wires. And you can't really get in there and strip the wires and connect it. So just, kind of gingerly but firmly pull that wire through the heat shrink tubing, and then you have a good chunk of wire to work with. First, you have to focus. This is what, maybe I shouldn't have done this on a professional camera, because focusing is a bear. Okay, so you want to split out the wires because they're stuck together, and then you want to strip the wires. And these wires are too small to go in any of the, predetermined hole stripper things, so you got to kind of deftly strip them out with the cutter portion of the pliers, but that's not too tricky. The shielding on these cables breaks and slides pretty easily. Okay, then you do the same to the little doodad that came with the fan. Just strip the casing off the wire. Give it a twist so it doesn't get screwed up when you're shoving it into the joiners. Okay, so now, these little things are interesting. I hadn't seen these before, and I am by no means an electronics expert who does this stuff all the time, so maybe these are common, I don't know. But they're these little plastic wire fuser, joiner, or whatever you call them, clampy things. And what you do, we'll do the red ones. You take, well, first you focus. You take the red wire and you stick it in one side. You take the other red wire and you stick it in the other side. You make sure they're in there nice and good and snug. Then you take your pliers and you clamp down on the orange button, and it very satisfyingly clicks, and that locks these wires in. You can see they're not going anywhere. I'm tugging on it. I'm not going to, put my back into it, but they're good and locked in there. So these little thingers, I actually like them better than the traditional tube wire joiner things that you have to, really clamp the hell out of with pliers. And I never trust those things. But these things seem solid, and they're really easy to work with. And that's that. So now you've got that connected. Now we want to install the fan into the housing, which you just use regular little zip ties, and my zip ties are not long enough to get all the way around what we need to do, so I have to use 2 per side. And also take note of the direction of the airflow of your fan. Always keep that in mind. And for this unit, see how the arrow is going up? That's the direction the air flows through this fan. And for this unit, you want the air being sucked in from the bottom and blown into the PCB and onto the capacitors and all that good stuff. So airflow is this way, that means the sticker needs to be facing up, and you want the wire to be facing backwards just to keep it out of the way of all this other stuff. So you just fit it right on, it just kind of seats on this little slot right here. And on the bottom, there's no like holes or dedicated area for zip ties to go. It's just, you know, slots. So whatever, you just feed it through and you find the hole in the, actually I did that wrong. Just so I don't want the connector pieces on the zip tie outside of the housing. So you go through this hole here, comes out the bottom, loop it through, find the hole again on the other side and bring it through. And since I mentioned my zip ties are not long enough, I have to join two to make this work. There we go. And then put that one through. And just tighten those up. You might want to yank on it with your pliers just to get it nice and snug on that side. Just basically yank on both things until it clicks no more. And then I'm going to repeat that step for this side. Just bring the zip tie around the bottom, through the slot, over the horizontal bar in the slot so it doesn't move. Through there. Join the zip ties together. And connect that to the receiving end of the first one. Satisfying zippity clicks that zip ties do. And that could be a little snugger. Ow, Jesus. Okay, so now I'm just going to trim up these zip ties just to make it clean in there. That one didn't clip all the way for some reason. There we go. Dump those guys out. Okay, so now the last part of the interior of this project is you connect your adapter. It's obvious which way it goes, and also just in the interest of keeping things tidy in here and out of the way of the capacitors, which I'm sure get nice and hot, I am going to zip tie these wires together into a neat bundle to keep them kind of in between the capacitors. This is the B400 by Alien Bees, which only has one capacitor in it. Basically, it's one capacitor for 400 in the sticker. So the B800 has two of these capacitors, and I haven't taken apart my B1600 yet, but I assume that that has four because it has, you know, 4 slots for capacitors on the board. Anyway, tighten down that zip tie to keep the cables all neat. Trim that end. Okay, so now your fan is in. It's nice and snug. And it's time to reassemble, which is just go in reverse. Exactly what we did. Kind of line this up in the back there. You know, you can feed the buttons and the slider and the remote jack through the back here. And then you take the front board and you slide it on there, and it pretty much finds itself into the right spot, and then that just snaps on there. Give it a nice firm press, make sure these buttons are all in the right spot, and then you get this all dialed back in correctly. You might have to wrap this cable, tuck it, because when you take it apart, you'll notice that this grounding cable is kind of tucked into this second cardboard slot here. So seat that protector, kind of dip that ground cable into that slot there, just because otherwise it might poke out the bottom here, and you don't want that. And then it's a little fidgety to get this plate back in because it sits really snug into this housing. Get that in there nice and firm. And then you re-screw your plate screws. And as I said before, they're just going straight into what I assume is an unthreaded hole in the plastic molded casing. So they don't screw in smoothly. You got to put a little bit of oomph into it. Oop, almost stab yourself in the thumb with the screwdriver. Awesome. And just get those screwed back in. Then, now it's time to put the stand mounting thingamajig back on. Make sure the little discs are seated on either side of your thingy. Put your screw back in. Big washer, little black washer, and that. And that goes back on. Screw your locking lever back on. Just make it nice and tight. And there you go. That is too tight. There we go. So that's where I want it. All right, so that is that. Now take your pro grade Domino's pizza napkin and reinstall the flash bulb. Again, making sure to not get your greasy, greasy fingers on it. And do the same for your modeling light. And then, of course, give it a test to make sure you didn't screw up. Modeling light works. And the flash bulb works. And you will be surprised at how much quieter this is now that you have this new fan. It's a major difference. This one didn't have a messed up fan, but after I changed out the problem fan, oh yeah, don't forget to put your little rubber nubber on there. The one that was noisy is now super silent, and the other ones are now very noticeably quieter. It's a nice difference. Even if you're not recording audio, it's just nice to have quieter strobes in your studio. It's just less distraction, less hum, less annoyance, unless you're a big fan of white noise. I know I have a white noise machine in my bedroom, but I don't like white noise in the studio because it's just kind of annoying to me. So there you go. That is how you change out the cooling fan on an Alien Bees strobe unit.